Anybody want to share anything in Tlingit first?
There's no way he can be busy.
Huh? Is he lazy?
Oh. To the time, politicians or just politics in general.
You want to write that phrase down and break out the components if you can? I'll tell you where. I think the starting point is like right about a little over halfway to the right. So you got to stay on the right side.
Oh.
Right there. Jaqajin. Ishwasa. Thank you. Kesh ade dudan at buqaqtiyya. Okay. Now how would we blow that up? No way. Well, so I guess first of all, let's take it to the next step in segmenting. So it's a kesh dash de. Wait. You guys read that? Like, I know. Okay. So, here, I'll type it. Oh. So you guys hang tight. I'm going to switch this. Now you should be able to see it. One second. You guys see this? Okay, so there's the first phrase. The second thing we're working on is segmenting, which is breaking it into all the individual components. I'll show you guys on here. See if I can do it and show the class at the same time. Okay. So what we should have here is qa and qa. That's what's going to end up with I'll show you the tool that I use for this.
And that gives the gives the
Yeah, it should present us with the ah. I have a feeling I'm getting it a little bit out of order. Just 1 second. Okay, yeah. And then there should be qa. Should be qa, 0, z, t, yeah.
oh, it's 2 underlines.
And that's what gives us the kha.
The ga.
Yep. Actually got too long for my line. So let me share a couple other things to talk about. When we talk about segmenting here, what we're really talking about is figuring out all the different parts, blowing this up into its individual components. And this is where a number of times I'll use this thing with these little toy blocks. I had this idea once that if I made them into little toys, that somehow it would seem not as complicated, but it still seems just as complicated to me. But at least I can say, ooh, look, there's pretty colors. So let me talk about what we're looking at here.
Siri told about jealous when I showed her that one.
What's that?
Siri told about jealous when I showed her.
Did she?
Yeah. Because that faster than I just didn't have the color one.
I'll be happy to make colors for them. Or send them the template at least. Because, really I was like, I spent an inappropriate amount of time doing something like this because then it allows me to just sort of goof around for a while. And I think it's good. But I'm like, maybe I could commission somebody to make like little wooden blocks. Because, they're supposed to be like little wooden blocks. And eventually I just like used Illustrator and made my own. But as far as what we've got here, and this is what Carrie's talking about as we read through her thesis, is she's really talking about how do I identify the different components of the Tlingit verb. And it's up to us how we what method we decide to sort of take ourselves to. Because we could take ourselves to the extreme. And really what you have is you have categories and things within that category. So looking through the Downhours material, I was reading through just the appendices in the Tlingit Linguistics the other day, and I was like, that's where I got that idea about the slot machine. Because I just like steal stuff from all over the place. I'm like, yeah, it's like a slot machine. Somebody told me that somewhere. So it kind of is. So you've got these little wheels, and it's almost like there's a little light above the wheel. And there's a bunch of stuff that's just turned off. It's not there. And then when we move into a certain verb mode, we throw these certain switches, and then we activate the wheel, and then there's little combinations on the wheel. And the reason why we're using the wheel as a metaphor, and sometimes blocks, I don't know why, maybe I could think of like 6 more metaphors to put in there by next time I teach this. But, so there's a wheel, and there can only be one thing active at a time on that wheel, right? So there's a wheel that has ka and ka, but you can only have one of them. And thankfully, they sound exactly the same and mean totally different things. One is a horizontal surface, one is a spherical sort of object. Anyways, so if we're looking on here, the areas that we're looking at, and the way that I use this thing is when I'm trying to break things out and segment them, is remember which order I see them. And so when we get into some of these more advanced modes towards the end of the semester, when we're going to see this one, the potential attributive, which translates as there's no way he or she can verb. Right? And it's a really neat form. It's used grammatically when you're trying to convey meaning in real certain ways, like, no, that's just not possible for it to be that way. Now, for example, this particular one could be pretty fun, right? There's no way he could be busy, right? And so, or she. So a number of things that we look at here, and there's these titles for these things, and sometimes the titles are really long, and it's up to you which titles you want to sort of subscribe to. What I'm going to try to do is present this stuff in manageable segments. So I was thinking, okay, we've got like the Duplo blocks with a big clunky like toddler, put them together, you could still build a house with the blocks. And we can work our way up to Legos, where there's a bunch of now smaller pieces, and there's a lot more to keep track of, but you can be a little bit more dynamic. And then we're going to get into building models, right, with a whole bunch of tiny millions of pieces. And this is getting towards the model, building the model, or maybe it's on the Lego side, I'm not sure. But some of the things that we're going to watch for is we centralize where the root is. The root is the heart of the Tlingit verb. We think once we've located the root, everything tends to go to the left from there. And then there's a few things that go to the right. So as we're segmenting things, we're trying to get ourselves to the root and figure out what kinds of components are there. And there's a number of different charts and tables and things we can use until we memorize which components tend to be there for these certain verb forms. And so, and then we'll see how they contract and they put themselves together, they change themselves, but they do so in fairly predictable ways. As we add more variables, there's a little bit more stuff to remember. But then once you've got this potential form, you can use it in a whole bunch of other things, and it helps you to remember the conditional form. There's a number of different potential forms, like I would have done this, but something. When this happens, blank, blank, blank. And so we can learn these different verb modes. For now, we will slow it down, but this is a neat one to take a look at. So the first thing is identifying the order of these things. Outer conjugation, irrealis, inner conjugation, the perfective, and the qa mode. And we'll talk about these things and what they particularly mean: vertical surface, horizontal surface, aerial, objects. There's a number of different things that are really important for us to remember. And we'll work our way up there through a building block approach. Now, as far as when we get to certain examples of things, like when we see these kind of complicated prefix combinations, we're like, okay, well, there's the root. I think there's the root. What are these things that are popping up before? In the appendix of the 575 Tlingit verbs, and also on the 575 Tlingit verbs website, we've got these prefix strings. We also have those prefix strings in Crippen's material, and we'll take a quick look at that to try and find this thing that we've got going on here. So this is the verbal structure handbook for that Crippen has developed. And really we should learn how to use this thing, whether we're just sort of jumping into it to find a quick answer, or we're sort of reading through it to continue to sort of do. And this is sort of just a gathering of the tables. I was looking at a draft of his dissertation. I think it's over 500 pages at this point. It's going to be really this pretty phenomenal piece of work on Tlingit that's going to answer a whole ton of questions. There'll always be more questions out there. Like I just got an email message back from Zeus about, let's see, there was August Yakunahin, and then there might be August Yakunain. And what we're, and so we're coming up with theories about how these different things work. And I posed a theory that maybe it's a dialect thing, right? So one of the things I'm trying to do is migrate these conversations to tlingitlanguage.com so that people can watch the conversations. Because a lot of times these conversations take place in emails between a few different people. And a number of times we said, we should just sort of try and figure out a way to put this out there so that even if it means somebody poses a question, somebody has a theory, and then somebody else has a different theory, and then someone's theory proves to be right. There's nothing wrong with being incorrect. It's sort of just saying, well, maybe it's this, right? So the latest that, because I asked Bessie Cooley, because she's the speaker, and then she gave us her interpretation of it. And it was really interesting, and it has to do with whether something is coming, and maybe you can see it coming, and maybe you can't see it coming. And that's what it comes down to. Like, kuwaha could be maybe something is coming, and it's not perceptible. Kuwa'a is something is coming, and it is perceptible. Which would make sense, because you don't see ha, that changing to a, right? And so we'll talk about how verb stems shift and the predictability of that shift. There's really, the double A ending and the double O ending and what those switch to, especially when they get a closing suffix on. But sort of jumping way ahead, which we'll do now and then. Moving through this document, what you have, the Tlingit Verbal Structure Handbook. It's really just trying to take this thing and saying, we're moving from left to right as far as things you would see if you were to write down Tlingit. So we're going to encounter the first things you would hear and end with some of the last things you would hear. And we're really thinking of the concept of a verb phrase. How do we diagnose a verb phrase when we encounter it? Because we should be getting to the point where we can write Tlingit with a decent degree of accuracy, and then we can look at that Tlingit, we can hear Tlingit and have our own sort of interpretation of what we're getting on the spot. And I think you should be pushing yourself to listen to as much Tlingit as possible and to think about it in English as little as possible. Because a lot of times, if you're always moving yourself back and forth, which is ironic because we do a lot of back and forth movement in here. But, I was talking to someone who had been studying Tlingit for a long time, and she said, I'll be listening to someone and I know what they're talking about, and all of a sudden I don't know what they're talking about. And I said, well, you're probably continuously translating what they're saying, and you're living in this translation. And this is the way that language acquisition works. And at some point you have to say, okay, I need to just give myself over to that Tlingit thought world and exist in that thought world and respond with Tlingit. And that is probably the hardest step to take, to continue with metaphors. It's like you're going to go jump into the water off of the dock, and you just sort of keep poking your toes in. I'm in the water, but then you always get the safety net where you don't have to fully submerge yourself. And at some point, you have to submerge yourself, especially if you want to become conversational in Tlingit. I think that is the big difference. Kashachishti has asked several times, and others have asked several times, what's the difference between the people who learned how to speak Tlingit and the people who didn't? And I think it's we let go of English. At some point, we just let it go. And I think you have to do that. But in the meantime, here's a bunch of tools to help you continue to maneuver back and forth, feeling safe, building your raft, or whatever you're doing. So we got a list of tables, list of figures. We got an introduction to the handbook. We've got some information on Tlingit and the dialect system, which we've talked about. And here there's 3 listed with transitional below, whereas transitional is listed as a 4th dialect and 575 Tlingit verbs. But Tongass, Southern, transitional, Northern. Those are our main dialects. Some of the things that I think are emerging is there is a definite connection, I think, between Angoon, some speakers in Sitka, Cake, Wrangell, Yakutat, Tesla. Those 6 areas are doing some very similar things when it comes to the way that they handle their vowels. There's some different things that go on in Southern Tlingit and some of the Southern Transitional Tlingit, where they're doing a lot more contraction in the prefix. They're more likely to do contraction than Northern speakers. And then with true Southern Tlingit, there's some different things that go on with some of your tones, with falling tone. But as far as there's some very predictable types of patterns where in EI, Eich, Sak, Eichi, Aya, Awacha, Na, Kishin, Get, Ichiko, Asak, Ichi. And it's not across the board, but there's quite a few. Like 8, I don't think anybody says eat. But there are quite a few others where EI becomes EE. And we just sort of move back and forth and keep in mind where we're from. And as we try to honor our own dialect, we just pay attention to this stuff and we force ourselves to start speaking in these other manners. The next thing we got is the larger sort of language family picture. Here is Tlingit and the Dene-Eyak family. We have Eyak, Dene, Northern, Southern, Pacific Coast. And then we get into how tone works in the different dialects. We get into the Tlingit sound system, which is charted out here for us. We get into more vowel inventory, talking about falling vowels. And then we get into a chart of how nouns function. Right? We talked about this, the types of nouns that there are. And when we encounter a noun in Tlingit, asaya wutusatin, adataya ketushaat, kunahawe, kudachsawe wesa, kudachsawe chucha kushinkit sindatani dachrage, was just kek syllable. Yeah, just gawayachati yata. Ya kayati ko ayuchatang, was ataya hasawshiyech, was ataya hasawahis, chakut yuchatangi dachaya hasawach. So what we're saying is when we encounter Tlingit nouns, if they're very short, like often 1-syllable words and sometimes 2, those are probably the really old type of Tlingit words. When they start to get into 3 syllables, 4 syllables, we start to question, where does that word come from? That might be a newer Tlingit word where, maybe there weren't hummingbirds when Tlingits come here 15,000 years ago. And when hummingbirds show up, there's a couple of different options. That word either is a constructed word that has some meaning. For example, kashashchao, that has a meaning. Ganda de gugu, that has a meaning. Hinyikleich, that has a meaning. But then others, the gitkiya, maybe that's a borrowed word. So it either gets borrowed from another language or it's constructed right there. Like we need to make a word for that thing, so we make a word for that thing. Based on its characteristics, it tends to be descriptive. So those are the sort of qualities of these types of nouns. And then we get into, can it be possessible, can it be possessed or not? Names cannot be possessed. There's no chunei, can't say that, right? And so names are the only thing that fall into this unpossessible category. They sit, they don't get altered. Names don't get altered. And then we get into the possessible forms. Possessible nouns, there's 2 categories: inalienable nouns and alienable nouns. Inalienable means they need to have a pronoun that belongs to it unless it goes through some process where it's been made alienable. So there's just standard alienable nouns, right? Gucha, kis, chonk, yesh, kate, this whole series, they can exist on their own, and if they get possessed, they follow the rules of Tlingit possession, where they get a suffix added to the name. And relational nouns, which we're calling directional bases often. And it's interesting to sort of think about what kind of terminology are we going to deal with. There's not a unified terminology with a lot of Tlingit things, and that's fine. It's up to you what kind of what kind of description you're going to use to talk about these things and think about them, the most important thing is how you internalize the concepts. Body parts can become alienated, and what happens is they gain a possessive suffix, and that means they've been removed, and they're probably not going back. Right? So like if Jose Canseco shot his finger off, that was probably still du, and then he brought it in, and they tried to reattach it, and then it fell off later because it was unsuccessful, and now it's probably du, because it's not going back on. He can still carry it around, but it's now in a completely altered state. And that's the same. I think there's still some debate about animal parts. A lot of people think the animal parts, and I used to think this, would always gain a possessive suffix, but I don't think they do. I think they do when people think of them as separated from the animal, which is oftentimes when you're talking, do you have some kind of prop or something? So those are the concepts. Kinship terms, they need the pronoun as well. The possessive pronoun is what we're talking about. And then they can lose the possessive pronoun if you're talking directly to that person, right? So you could say, Ati, Ish, and you're talking directly to that person. Then we get into the rules of the possessive suffix and how it functions. I think there's a couple more rules than these, so this is a good standard chart to sort of look at and help you remember. Then we start getting near the category of talking about how verbs function, how Tlingit grammar functions using this chart. We've got suffixes that get generally attached to nouns, what they mean. There's also a linguistic term for these here, which is it shows the abbreviation and then also the name. And this is for the Crippen method of segmenting and glossing, which we utilize here in this class. So if you wanted to sort of practice your segmentation and glossing of Tlingit, blow these parts up and see what is in there. And the idea of it's sort of like when we were growing up, my dad used to bring home, he was a communications technician. So he would bring stuff home like a radio or telephone. And he would tell us to take it apart. And then when we took it apart, he would tell us to put it back together and see if it still works. That's the sort of thing that we're trying to do with Tlingit grammar here. So we take it apart to reveal its little pieces and how they get put together, and then see if you can put those pieces together yourself, which you can. And then we start getting into directionals. We've talked about directionals, the three different types. Determiners, which are determined entirely by where things are in location in relation to the speaker. Relational bases, how one object relates to another object. And then we have relational suffixes, which can attach to the relational bases and also the independent bases. Independent bases have to do with where things are at in relation to fixed points, which in the Tlingit universe is where the ocean meets the shore. So moving along, shout out if you have questions, otherwise I'm going to try and get to this point and just show you how to use these things. So here are some commonly encountered relational nouns, what we've been calling directional bases. Either term is completely fine. And then it has a definition here. And what Crippen does and what we're moving towards in some of the materials that we're going over in this class is, for a long time in a dictionary, you would look something up, like if you looked up sh, the end of something, and it would say sh, and then the definition would be end of it. But there's been confusion for a while about what to do with the part, because then sometimes students would use that, and they might say, so sh is the end of something, and they might say, de sh away, there's the end of the road, but the doesn't need to be there. So what we're using now is a longer dash, what we call an end dash, which is saying this needs to belong to a noun, but it's not a hyphen, and that means it sits as its own word. So that's what that thing means. And this is great to have a list of them here. So I was really excited when these lists were being put together, so that you have them all in one place. You have this sort of portable thing that you can carry around, and it helps you to figure these things out as you memorize them. Because your goal is to memorize as many of these things as possible, so you can say, oh, it's next to the house, it's in front of the house, it's behind the house, it's behind the house on the mountainside, away from the ocean. Okay. So now we get into some areas about how Northern, Southern, and Tongass Tlingit are handling some things here as far as when it's starting to embed things into the front of the noun. And now we get into adjectives. These are the known Tlingit adjectives. There's two types of adjectives. What are the two types of adjectives?
They go before a noun or after.
Yes, so this top one, these go before the noun. The bottom one, they go after the noun. Right. So that's what this is showing with the space and then the underscore. This is saying that's where the noun is, right? So some of them you would have sheech, cake, ka, cake, and those go before. Then you might have cake, sak, right? It's going to be a dog. I don't know what. Cake, claim, right? So you could have these things. So that's what this list tells you. It tells you how the adjectives function. And there's ways to make verbs into adjectives, but we're not going to deal with that right now. Then we get a list of pronouns here. We're going to talk about pronouns today. As we're reading through Carrie's dissertation, one of the things that we start dealing with is pronouns. And we've dealt with them before. We'll just continue to practice them because it's one of the most common parts of conjugating verbs. Who did what to whom, right? And that becomes really important. And the more dynamic you can be with that, easier. Then then it becomes easier to conjugate verbs for mode, and then you could start being dynamic and moving between modes and moving between subjects and objects. And that's really the key of the whole thing. Now we start getting into a few different terms, and these are some terms that we're going to talk about, valency, salience, and some different linguistic terms that we're going to be running into, and the idea is to sort of give you a basic definition of those terms so that you understand what they're doing. The field of linguistics is really just, it's a science field to say we can talk about all languages doing very common things using a separate set of vocabulary. Now we get into the verb template. So the Dowenhauers have looked at this, Lear has looked at this, Eggleston has looked at this, Cable and Crippen have looked at this. They all have their slightly different ways of approaching the verb theme and how to sort of break it down. And really what this reveals is all the possible components. Right? So when we look at the verb theme that Eggleston is listing, that gives us the bare minimum. It says, at the minimum, you need to have these things to use this verb. And then you fill in the blank with whatever those other things are. But this is saying at maximum, this is the things that could be there, and this is where they appear. And it's important to remember, for me, it's where does the hus go? That is always something I've got to think about all the time so that I'm conjugating the verb properly. And it just takes practice. So now we get into some verb morphemes. Here's some different things you might see in these positions. This page, page 13, is intended to say, I'm looking at a verb, I don't know what this thing is. You look it up here, and then you roll back a page, you say, oh, it's one of these things, right? So you might encounter at the front of a verb. Like, what is that? And this shows you what position you might be looking at. This page here shows you, again, the verb theme and these different names for these different areas of the verb. And as far as how far you want to go in linguistics, how far you want to go in terms of Tlingit grammar, it's a personal decision on, how much is going to be helpful to you. There might be times you're always going to a chart. There might be certain verb modes where you just say, I'm not even going to worry about it. I just want to be able to say some basic stuff, past, present, future. It's all I really want to do. But if you want to be able to stand up and tell stories and give big speeches the way that the old timers used to do back in the day, then you need to unlock this stuff. And you become a powerful person as far as Tlingit language is concerned. So moving on, now you get a list of preverbs. And it's going through and defining what these preverbs are. There's a number of them that are identical, And it's just a matter of, it's sort of a slippery slope of how far you want to just sort of do this fine line stuff. And whenever we do this sort of segmenting, glossing, blowing it into pieces, we remember when you put it together with the Tlingit mind, it's a different approach. Because you might have, and we're going to see this here, kesh ade. Kesh ade doesn't mean no way. But kesh ade plus verb, with a few things turned on in the prefix, yeah. That construction means no way he or she can verb. You know, and then so, and we'll look at these dynamics. And some of the dynamics, if we just sit and think about them, they might not make sense, but it's just that's the way it functions. So you could say, so if we say kesh ade verb yet, we forget about the prefix stuff. We're not even going to worry about that. And we say there's no way he or she can verb. What if I said ade verbi yet? What does that mean? How is that different? Ade yena guddiye.
Where is that place?
Well, toward, and so we say, okay, ade yena guddiye. Ade you, that was a bad example. Boo for me. Okay. Ade kashahitiye. How's that? Ade kashahitiye. So when we have ade verbi yet, that translates to the way he or she verbs. Right. So you're talking about the, so you're describing the way that that verb is taking place. And so when we get into verbs and how they function, how language functions, a lot of this terminology helps because we're talking about some pretty fine line stuff, because we're not just talking about writing. We're talking about writing, will write, won't write, can't write, should have written, the way he or she is writing, when he or she is writing, if he or she writes, because he or she wrote. So there's all these different things that we could do, and we see that English is not particularly dynamic as far as the verb itself. There's just all kinds of stuff that goes on outside.
So with the ade verbi yet, does this like posty noun? I think it's noun.
So yeah, you might say Akaawe utusaku ate du dat at kusti. We know how he's busy. We know how he's busy. Right? And so that's saying we understand the ways in which he is busy. So this is, the way that somebody is, like, for example, I'm telling a story and I see somebody that I know, but then I ade atgudiye kashayakaya kwashkawashuk ha just sit kausanaya. And then I saw him, the way he was walking, it wasn't right. Thought maybe he's drunk. It's noon, right? So it's about the quality, the way that somebody's doing something. And these are some different just ways to be more dynamic with thinking. So if we say ate kashahitiye, the way he or she is writing, right? I don't know why I would talk about it. Maybe it was like I was impressed. I had an art teacher, and he subbed for history class. I was thinking about this because we found out recently that when the Tlingit teachers get sick in the school district, they just cancel Tlingit. Like that doesn't happen with other subjects. Even if, and then I said, well, I had a history class one time, and we just read, and our teacher came in and drew things with both hands at the same time. And I mostly just watched him draw things because it was neat. So maybe I'd be talking about the way he was drawing things with both hands at the same time. And they were symmetrical. Anyways. Oh, and then he said that Da Vinci used to take notes and draw at the same time. Anyway, digression. So what if we said kashahitiye and we cut the ade? So we just take kesh ade and we just cut the kesh off, Now we just cut the ade off. What does that do?
The place, right?
Right, the place where the verb happened, right? So these are some really interesting things. Process-wise, it's fairly straightforward, but as far as what it's doing, as far as the meaning, so we could say kashikit, he's right, kashikit, kashikitiye, the place where he or she is writing, right? Like maybe that's the room where Hemingway wrote his books, in his underwear, whatever it is. And then we could have ade kashikitiye, the way that he's writing in his underwear. The Tony's in, just do Tony's head tokatar. What's up, Kawashuk? Just sit Gausana. And then we have Kesh ade kankashitiye. There's no way he could write. Kahuch kudachawe now. He drank too much. He's done. Okay. Enough picking on Hemingway. Hemingway. Okay, so let's move through this thing. We're not going to move through the whole thing. I want to get to the Edward stuff. A few definitions and a few different sort of conjugation exercises for everybody in the room. And online. You guys are in the room. So now we get into what we call incorporated nouns. These are another term, a more detailed term for what we're calling the thematic prefix. There's some different things that will pop up in front of the verb. Some of them are a lot more common than others. I don't see too many verbs with tuk built into the front, but I do know a few with san for the limbs, right? For something that ties up limbs. So these are things that might pop up in the verb. The verb can get extremely complex. You can have ones that stack in there. I think the one to wave your finger, like if you're saying no, at somebody, like that basketball player, Dikembe Mutombo, and he would block somebody and then he would go like that to them. And they start getting technical fouls because he did that. Like that is a very complicated verb because it's like shaking the head of the finger to and fro, basically what it comes down. So these are the parts that you can look at and you see where they exist. They exist after the object, before the conjugation prefixes. It's the thematic prefix section. And they're listed out here because there's actually slots within those slots. And it's up to you how detailed you want to become and at what levels you're going to reach these other, at what speed you're going to reach these other levels. This one becomes before this one, and this one, and this one. So now we're starting to get into different ways to code. And what we look at when we're looking at verb themes, we're looking at this verbal structure handbook, ways to code Tlingit so that we can decipher that code and use that code to help us conjugate. Right, so this is showing some of the things that would be there. It's showing the stem variation. When we get into stem variation, there are two factors. There's the type of stem, and then there's the conjugation prefix. Those two things, yes.
Can you make it a little bigger?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, TlinkitLanguage.com is down to it.
Is it? I think I crashed it last night.
I just went on there.
Did it work?
Yeah.
I
I
was,
was on there earlier today.
I was just trying to open it up so I could blow it up here.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I was in there like 5 minutes ago.
Oh, you broke it.
Just too many people on it.
It's just flooded, man. I did something yesterday. I know it wasn't working last night, but I thought it was working today.
Well, earlier today it was.
Can you get on?
I'm checking right now.
I
It's
just got on.
spinning.
Really? Bizarre.
Should I get off the one phone?
A couch to walk. A couch. usually broken. Okay, so we're going to get into the stem variation, the types of stems that are there. And really, there's just a stem has a certain type of behavior. So there's a default. It varies like it normally should. And then it just depends on the conjugation prefix. And then there's a couple other different variations. And then there's invariable stems, which are actually kind of rare. So that's what this one is showing, and we'll get there. Well, and as far as how stem variation is marked, it's handled differently by Crippen than it is by Eggleston. So we'll talk about those differences as we get to that point. So next we get to a continual sort of an ongoing discussion of stem variation. On the bottom of page 21, we've got classifiers listed. On the next page over, we start to get into the verb modes and what's required for those particular verb modes. And so again, it depends on what helps you. This is listing them out by saying, if you look across on this table, you're going to have these things marked, or these things are going to appear in these certain categories. Then in your brain, you remember where those things go. We're also working on some handouts. A handout that I started last semester, which was sort of showing these things more as a verb theme, following the verb theme pattern. And so you can sort of fill in the blank that way. And so this goes through and it lists a lot of the major forms. And it talks about, realis and irrealis, which is just saying affirmative or not. It's happening or it's not happening. And then we start getting into some other information, how certain repetitive imperfectives are formed, getting into conjugation prefixes and how they affect the progressive imperfective, and we'll talk about that. And then we get into this chart over here on the page 26 is talking about categories of motion verbs. So one of the things as we start to talk about verbs, we talk about verb types. What are the verb types? 5 fingers, 5 types.
Action.
Action or an act. Right?
Motion.
Motion,
Event.
event or eventive,
Stative.
state or stative,
Position.
positional, right? So those are our 5 forms. Positional we can start with. It only occurs in the imperfective. It's very easy. There's really not very many of them. I think there's maybe 10, maybe 20 of them altogether. They're pretty rare, something to be situated somewhere. The next easiest one is actually motion verbs. But when we say it's easy in Tlingit, that means it's easy if you can memorize this massive list of things. But I'm trying to put these things into a list. So what you have is you have these types of motion which are totally prescribed by the preverb, or maybe by just the general understanding of what's going on. This basically general sort of ongoing motion that has some sort of definitive stopping point. There's upward motion, downward motion. Those are the 4. So what you're going to see is a motion verb. What you're going to get is there's going to be a basic theme. It's this thematic prefix, it's an object maybe, it's a subject maybe, and here's the classifier and the root. From there, there's different things you can put into the preverb, and I'll show you this big list when we'll start talking about motion verbs. I'll give you guys a list on Wednesday, and we'll talk about it. So when you see those things, you automatically know this goes to 0 conjugation. For example, the letter T, right? So they slaint. The king salmon swam to Tesla. It made it there, right? So the motion has completed. Teslin day wugut we ka. That's a na conjugation because it's a day, right? De, day, nach, dach. So we'll look at the list. And then there's not very many ga or ones. So the big thing is remembering which ones are 0, which ones are not. And that's what this list is here. And you have the list here. I know there's an awful lot of things to remember, an awful lot of components to these verbs, but you do have tools to help you. And it's really just understanding how these tools function. So like when Zeosh first came out with this book, I was all excited. Yeah, I'm waiting for this book. And because you can carry it around, it's pretty small, and you can just you have it on your phone. And it's something I refer to on a regular basis, as far as when I'm putting verbs together, when I'm trying to translate stuff, when I encounter some unusual words. And there's some elders who I work with, and they love just sitting around thinking of stuff that they don't hear anymore, where they're like, I don't even know what this means. And then we sort of try to tease out that meaning. It's a lot of fun.
I have a question.
Yes.
There's also a T that uses the non-conjugation.
Uh-huh.
Can you explain that?
So that one is specifically when you're saying to just go around in a place. Like you could say, nicht gut. He went home. At gut. He was just walking around. So it's a sort of like an unbound motion. So and this one's used a lot when talking about Raven. He's just walking, not having any real direction. And it's usually used specifically with at. They say at gut, at gut. It's just flying around. You're not specifying an actual direction. Are we still hanging in? Okay. So now we're still looking at these motion verbs and how they function. This shows us the conjugation prefix, and this shows us the preverb, and this gives us the meaning. The other thing that it's showing us here is different types of classifiers we might see, the way they start to sort of function. We're starting to get into the interactivity of these different components. What happens when all these components start stacking together? The rule of 3. Find the root, and you go 3 spaces to the left, and if you have 3 or more things, there'll be contraction. It'll just start to happen. This shows you the categories when we're looking at these prefix contractions, where these different things will occur. Ka, j, ha, ka, tu, sh. So again, these are the wheels. This is what is on the wheel, and it's showing you here. We get into these different prefix combinations and these common combinations that we're going to have. Ka is what we have here on the board. And it just depends on types of things that we're seeing and what kinds of things are getting put on here. So I want to wrap this part up. I know we're going longer than I anticipated, but we do start to get into here the prefix shape and what are the components that go into that prefix. So I think the Edwards one is awesome. It shows you how to conjugate these things for person. This one also shows you how to conjugate things for person, and it shows you what things are there. The one difference is this is showing you CA, C, CA, 0, and this is showing you what the classifier shape is. So this is saying it could be tla, it could be sa, it could be da. The capital C means there's a consonant there, and it could be any of the consonants. All right, so we have here on page 33, these are all future forms that we might see here. So basically we can get up to here and we can add the classifier, and we add the root, and we have the future form. First person singular, first person plural, second person singular, second person plural, and so on. We get into here, and we're getting into 0 conjugation. So what we've got here is usually some of the imperfectives that we'll see here, and we'll talk about that form today. Na conjugation, so this is saying if there's a na conjugation prefix in there, it's for certain progressive imperfective forms. these conjugation prefixes, when they turn on in certain forms, that's when you start looking to this chart to see how to put it together when you start to conjugate for subject. When you throw an object on there, it changes it, but not as dramatically as the subject, because the subject is fully embedded. And then we've got ga, and here we've got zero conjugation and qa mode. We go down na conjugation, qa mode, and then we finally get to here with qa conjugation and qa mode. What brought us to this whole sort of 35-minute discussion is this on the board. So we're going to find, and what we have here is this capital CV that pops up in the front. This is saying there could be a thematic prefix there. It doesn't matter which one. We've got verb or vowel and consonant. Where are we? There it is. Oh wait, we've got a thing here. Right. And this shows us what the components are. Would be right here. And then and then 0. Actually, it might be this. It should be this one, sorry. Okay, enough of that. Yeah, your analysis. So, I turned the screen share off and you were on there for a second. Mysteriously. Okay, so I have some little boxes on the board, and if we're stepping out of our Lego boxes mode and back into our Duplo block, what else do they call those? I think there's 2 different kinds, Duplo and, so the big chunky blocks. So I have here, I know you guys online probably can't see this. What's this one here? It has a little root marker. Let's start with an easy one. Okay, there we go. That is the root. So we're thinking sort of big picture here, and we're trying to put this thing together, and this probably looks terrible. Let me try goofing around with this. No. There. Maybe that helps. Maybe that just looks weird. Okay, so we've got the root, and we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 boxes to the left, a plus sign, and then another box. 1 box to the right, a plus sign, and another box. What are the different parts that we have to the verb?
The what degrees that are classified?
Yes, okay, there we go. So, maybe I'll try different. Do they have a different color? Okay. I think red is all I have. It's going to be the angry red movement today. So, give me a couple examples of verb roots. Okay, TK.
Team.
Team. What is team? To see?
See it?
To see, okay. A couple more.
Call.
Call. What does that mean?
Teach.
Call, there's 2 of them. There might be 3. One is to say something, and the other one is to sew. So, and this is where we get into 1, 2. So what's another team? Do we know of another team? Travel. 2 more. Dasaway?
What are you looking at?
Oh. Yeah, I'm saying, I know you guys know more than 2 verb groups.
Oh, you want other verb groups?
Yes,
I
any.
thought you were looking for more.
Oh, I'm sorry. Give me all the teams. We're going to list every verb. No, any verb group. What's fine? Team. And then line K-E-E-N. What's that? Fly. Dienaka. Eat. Is that L-E-E-L? What is that?
I don't know, but I hope I don't have to go until it's class.
This gets its own number too. I mean something different. Poop. It's the act of poop. It's a very special number. Okay. What about classifiers? 16 of them. Take it.
Just name all class.
Yeah.
0.
0.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sit. Shit. Huh?
Na.
No. Right.
No.
So everybody says. Sit. Oh wait, guys. Shit. Sa. There we go. Zip. Zip. Duh. We do have a dip. What do we got?
Jit.
Jit. Pretty good. Kayfech nasafun kejin say dushu da dushu nas dushu kushak jinkat jinkat katek jinkat katek da hunay atina khayat. Da qasaqa. Gle. We've got stuff on. Oh, gla. I think that's just. Then we have. Shh. Kayfech nasafun kejin say dushu da dushu nas dushu kushak jinkat jinkat katek jinkat katek jinkat kanas jinkat kadehun jinkat kakejin. Daqasa kef 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. S 1, 2, 3, 4. L 1, 2, 3, 4. Sh. Okay. All right. Now what?
Subject.
Okay. Where does that go?
You left the classifier.
Name some subjects. What would Cyril say? Let's start with my favorite subject, me. Ha. What about we? To. You.
Esse,
Y'all.
we,
Yeah. He or she. You got it. Yeah, all right. Good job. I thought I heard it. People. Someone.
us,
Yeah, so then we might have us. Oh, let's put it. Okay. Okay. Am I missing a box? Yeah, I'm missing a box. Okay. No. What else is in there? Subject, classifier, root.
With conjugation prefix.
Okay. So this would be so we might look at this as here's prefix right before the subject, and there's three types of prefixes. Conjugation prefix. What are our options? How many are there?
4.
Go. Name them. Oh, you guys got that one? 0?
No.
No?
Go.
Ga. Ah. Okay. What other type of prefixes are there? Well, I guess technically there are 3 others that I would probably put in the conjugation category, even though they're not necessarily conjugation. What are those 3? Not conjugation. Gut conjugation. Qa mode. Okay. What other type of prefixes do we have? Thematic. Let's list them all. I'm just kidding. Let's just list, what are the big ones? What are the main ones that we see most often? Or what does that have to do with? Mouth? J? What's that one? Yeah.
2.
2. What's that one? Yeah. What's that one? Vertical surface. Yeah. Cup. What's that one?
Horizontal surface.
Ka. What's that one? Ka. What is that one?
New space.
It's comparative, like this compared with that. So these are some of the main. There's a bunch of others. The one that's like really crazy for me to conjugate. We're going to run. That's crazy to me because it takes an object, prefix, or it takes an object instead of a subject, and then it has slip in there. We're going to run. Okay. Okay, we don't have to list out some of the others, but we've got the prefix. What's the other type of prefix we might have? Aspect. And then, you is going to be there. And the others are sort of drifting back and forth as far as how they function as well. Okay, so what comes before the prefix? Oh, yeah, well, that's in there as well. Right, we've got the aerialis. But I would consider the aerialis sort of part of the prefix. And maybe there's another category somewhere in here for it. It just gets its own thing. Yeah. Object. Okay, so we'll come back. We're going to have to list them all. We'll do some a little bit with this last 7 minutes that we have. What happened? What's that thing? Okay. So there's a handout I gave you that has some key terms as far as looking at linguistics. Some of the things that we've been reading so far. There was a great question, which was this stuff. This is great. How do I remember all of it? And that is like the question of all time, because there's different approaches to this stuff. Sometimes it's going through, and I think we spend a day talking about theory, breaking stuff down, talking about resources, how to use them, but then we're using a lot of English. So what we've got to do is go back into the Tlingit. We've got these stories, we've got the audio for it. There's all kinds of different things. There's different techniques as far as internalizing this stuff. There's one is saying, I want to spot this stuff and learn some verbs that use these different incorporated things. Ka is in tons of things. So learn some verbs that have that on there. But then another part is going through, taking some of the stories, and photocopying the story out of the book, and then just circling a whole bunch of stuff. Locating, going in there looking for certain things, or pulling verbs apart and seeing how they're functioning. Can I identify the different parts that are in here? And can I start practicing how I might use that particular verb in a number of different ways? The other thing you could do is you can take some recorded Tlingit and you could practice writing down what you might be hearing, translating what you're writing down. And that's the act of transcription and translation. I was talking to somebody about this yesterday. I said, there's maybe 5 people in the world that can really do this stuff. And it's not enough. It's not, all of us are tremendously overworked. And so one thing that we should be doing is a lot more practice with that, so that if we encounter some Tlingit, there's ways to listen to it and listen to it and listen to it and internalize that. But then there's also ways to sort of take a look at what somebody is leaving you. As we sort of were translating the works of Cyril George, when he said certain things, right? In that moment, I knew that I had just heard something amazing. I was like, that was amazing. But then when I went through and sort of broke it down, that was like my brain understanding why my heart was telling me that was amazing. Right. And so these are some important steps. So there's different ways to take this material, and if you're always just looking at it, it's going to look like this really foreign thing. But if you're bringing it back into your studies of Tlingit, you're continuing to go back into the oratory, into the conversations, into stories. That's going to help. And then you've just got to engage yourself in Tlingit language where you're thinking about this stuff a lot less. It's this multifaceted approach to Tlingit. So we'll talk about these terms. We'll start, a little sidetrack, but we'll start moving through 575 Tlingit verbs. section by section. So one of the things that she's talking about in there, we'll talk about the verb theme and different ways to approach the verb theme and different ways to sort of utilize that verb theme. But going around, I'm going to say a verb, and we'll take turns, go around the room, and you translate this verb for me from Tlingit to English. Okay, so the verb theme, it's a n conjugation. It's an at. It has a subject. It's a D+0 classifier. And the root is to. What does that verb mean? Anybody know what the definition is? The to. To read or to count. Right. So the command form would be not the to, read. Right. Read. I should say at the end of every class. 9 to 2. Sorry. Okay. So I'll say the Tlingit. You tell me what the English. Who wants to go first? What, Aka? Okay. We should do like, okay, good. Khadatu.
Studying or learning?
I am reading. So am reading, we're doing the perfective form. So this is subject, da, to. That's the imperfective form of this verb. Okay. Jutin. Editu.
You are reading?
The two.
He or she is reading.
Yeah, what? To the two.
Weird.
A. Yid two. Y'all are reading. Yid two. Okay. Cheat woo. Hust two.
They are reading.
Yeah, what? Shakuish. Do two.
He's reading.
Dasa?
Do two, he or she is reading.
Do two. Someone is reading or people are reading. Right? So you could say do two away. It's something that's read. Right? Okay, so the next verb, has an object. It's a 0 conjugation prefix. Takes a subject. It's an S classifier, and the root is E. Anybody know what that verb is? To cook, right? So for someone to cook, for S to cook O is the way we see this. The imperfective form is S. The classifier is SA. The root is E, high tone. Uncle Ish. Chasa'i.
I'm cooking.
Yeah, or what? Isa'i.
You're cooking.
As'i. He or she is cooking. Tusa'i. Yeah, or what? Yisa'i.
You all are cooking?
Hasas'i. They are. Yeah, and they're cooking it. We'll just throw it on the end of these. Dus I. Yeah, away. Cheesh. We'll do a little bit more of that. It's a little bit more just sort of practicing. But what I'm going to do on Thursday is I'm going to find some more examples. And we're going to do this. So I'm going to have a couple more examples where I'll say the Tlingit and you tell me what it translates to. And then I'm going to give you the template for the imperfective form of this verb. And I'm going to ask you to conjugate it for person to me. And we'll start off where we're just doing these in order. I am, we are, you are, y'all are, he or she is, they are. But then we'll start shuffling it up and go in sort of random order. Yeah, we're going to cheesh, okay? We shake off to Satin, Dalkunyaki Khana, and cheesh. Tlinguitlanguage.com. Don't break it. Cheesh,